Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Stencil Saturday design. So I'm thinking that this week I want to go ahead and share kind of a little trick that I use a lot. And as you can see, I have marked my Crossed Squares stencil. So we're going to do a block design. And I do this a lot. A lot of times I'll do it out on paper first to kind of know where I'm headed with it. And I actually have not with this. So we're going to just kind of wing it. So this is a really neat way if you, you have a block on your quilt that you need to design and it's, you're not quite sure what to do. I like to play around with just, in this case, this is a 10-inch square. So as you can see, I wasn't able to fill the whole square with the grid because they're 3-inch squares. But that's okay. I just centered it on there. And, I have 3 by 3. So if your block were, let's say, 12 inches, then you would just, you'd have more squares marked in there. And the fact that it didn't go all the way to the edges is perfectly fine because I'm just going to stitch around here and give like a little frame around this. So one of my favorite things to do when I'm coming up with a block design, because I like some really angular straight line designs, and I like to create layers. So I want things to look like they're behind other things. So that's what I'm going to show you. I mean, because by marking this stencil to come up with a design or to create a design kind of using the lines that are here, not necessarily stitching all the lines, but as a guide, it's almost like designing it on a piece of graph paper. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and stitch this frame around here. So I have that done. I'm just gonna put my ruler here. Okay, so that's the frame. That is done, and I am going to go ahead and tie off. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not. Yeah, I am. The only problem with not having a real plan before I start is not knowing where I should start and stop to kind of try to make this a somewhat continuous. But the one thing I do know is that I'm going to stitch this line here the whole way around like this. And I'm also going to stitch this center square, and I want to stitch this square that's in the very center. So I'm going to start right here so that I can kind of do some of these things continuously. So my first step is that I want to stitch this square, okay? But I also want to stitch this square. So as I stitch up here, I'm just going to kind of pause, go in here and do what I'm doing in the center here before I come out, okay? Hope that makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch up to here. And the other reason it's nice that I have this X, because I'm going to add, after I stitch the square, a little frame around that as well. So let me stitch this square first. So now that that is done, I want to put a small frame around this. I'm going to do a 1/4 inch frame on that one. So I'm going to go ahead and just travel down. I can use that stencil line to make my miter. And I just need to remember that when I come to every one of these corners, to not forget to add that miter so they all have it. just go out and back in. And then out like that. And while I'm here, now that I'm looking at this, you know, I see this X. So I don't necessarily want this to be quilted down super tight. So what I'm going to do is actually just scoot out a little bit, and I'm going to stitch along these lines. So I'm going to stitch 1/4 of an inch away from that line, 1/4 of an inch to make an X in there. So I'm lined up on that. Watch for my hopping foot to touch this line and then go back out. And just travel over here. Hopping foot touches that line. And come back out, travel around this little corner. And again, when I see my hopping foot touch there, then I know I'm in the right place. Touches over here. Travel around the corner. Foot touch there. A little bit too far. And I think I am done with this center part now. So I'm going to go ahead and go out of here. And continue to do this square. Okay, now that I finished this one, I am going to I want to also put a frame here because that's going to start to create layers, because now this square, if it has a frame here in all the corners, it then looks like this one is back behind this whole thing. So I'm going to have to backtrack down to here. Okay, and you could make your frame that you put in here any size you want. I'm just choosing to do 1/4 inch. Now I am looking at this, and so since I chose not to quilt this so much, I do want to put a fill in here because that'll press this down, and I might as well do it while I'm here instead of going the whole way around and then having to do it then. So I'm just going to sneak in here, and I'll just do pebbles because they're pretty quick since it's a nice small area. And I just want to be sure that I work myself back over to that corner where I started so that I can scoot along into that next echo. So I'll come up here, down, do the echo on this little triangle. And then I want to come in here and do my little pebbles. So it's always nice too with the fills because they kind of can give these layers a little more depth to make them a little more obvious. And scoot out into this next one. Well, stitch that one. And I like to just back up a little bit so I have room to start doing the pebbles. Out of there, over to this last one. And then fill this one in. so I'm going to come to the corner here and let me think about what I'm going to do. Okay, so the next thing I know I wanted to do was now I want to stitch these lines the whole way around, like so I'm going to go ahead and travel. I could tie off and start again, but I'm just going to go ahead and backtrack down here. Okay, and I'm going to stitch this kind of, it's kind of like a zigzag line that goes around the whole thing. What I love about these layers is, you know, the depth and interest that it adds, but also as long as you can stitch one straight line with a ruler, I mean, there's nothing difficult about it. It's really just stitching lines. Okay, so now that when I'm looking at this, I think that I definitely also, I'm going to put a frame here. So this one will look like it goes, you know, under that center, as well as this one, the same. So I'm going to come in here, add a frame to this one. And again, it could be any size, but since I started with the 1/4 inch, I'm going to stick with that. Now, you might choose, and actually maybe I will. Maybe I'll do 3. So if you know, do a lot of echoing, so I started over here, I did 1. If I do 2, it would put me right back where I started, which would be okay. But if I do 3, it'll take me all the way back here. But we do need to add something, so maybe I will. I'm just going to do 2. So if I do 2, come down here, and I think I want to add some feathery kind of thing. If I have something to mark with here, I can give myself a little spine. Okay, so I am just going to draw kind of a, I don't know, just a random little spine, and I'm going to go ahead and draw that in. Well, no, I'm not. I'll just wait. And I'm just going to go ahead, I'm not even going to stitch this spine. I'm just going to add little feathers to it to get me up here. And because we're adding the little feathers, it's going to create the spine, essentially. And if you're not right on that spine, it really does not matter. And you can use any kind of feathers you want. I'm just using long arm feathers. When I get to this point, I'm just going to sneak right over here into this next one. Do my frame. One more. Oh, that's not the easiest to hold that there. Stop, add that quick little kind of wavy frame in there. And there's no need for these little wavy spines to necessarily even all be the same. And actually I didn't even mark it dark enough to see it, so we're kind of winging it here. I'm just going to come out, travel, do the next one. So let me go ahead and stitch these last 2. Okay, now that those are done, take a look here and think about what we can do on the outside. And I can already see what I want to do, and I'm thinking that it's put another frame here, and I'm gonna just do a single frame, which is gonna be a 1/4 inch. Let me start right here. Probably would look better 1/2 inch, and I think that I'm going to come back around with something to fill those, because I need to see it done first here. So this one's just going to go straight across. Okay, and so as I'm stitching this, I'm actually thinking that because I have this 1/2 inch and then there's this 1/4 inch, I think I want to do another 1/2 inch because the center is not so quilted. And I think that I want to keep this outside not as quilted, so that this is kind of what you notice the most. So I'm just going to go back around there one more time and do a 1/2 inch frame. Do I want to fill that? I think I do. So I'm going to put the pebbles, because the pebbles are already in there. So this will kind of make it all work together. So I would recommend that if you are going to use this idea, you know, kind of using a stencil to create a design, that you do it ahead of time. You wouldn't want to head over to a customer quilt and start kind of quilting it and not really knowing exactly what your plan was. I find that when I do that, it ends up taking me a lot longer because I have to stop and think about it so much. Out of here. So I'm just going to do that on the rest of those. I'll go ahead and stitch those. Okay, so I have this one last one. Okay, so we are done. Let's see if I can get some of these marks off of here. And we can have a look at it. My little, I find it hard to look at it and see kind of like the full effect with all those marks on it. That's better. Mostly better anyway. So I think it turned out really cute. I mean, and you know, again, like I said, I would definitely not go to your quilt not knowing. But it really is fun to just kind of play around. You can mark the stencil even on paper if you wanted to. You could really do the same with just a square grid, graph paper, to come up with the same idea. I like using this because then I have the ability to also mark it on my fabric and use it the same way. Okay, so hope you guys like that, and I'll see you next time. Bye.